Hello, this is Dan Baldwin, and today we're going to talk to you about how to set up phone, internet, managed IT services for a single location business. I'm a telecom consultant, and I've been doing this for about, 25 years. So I've done this presentation for my own customers about, 100 times or 1,000 times or a million times. I can't remember. But anyway, these are the things that you need to know and have on a checklist to get a vendor neutral solution created. So kind of go through this checklist with me, put down what works for your business, and then once you have a real understanding, then you can go to someone who can take an order for you or help you answer more specific questions. But if you don't have this checklist done, what you're going to do is you're going to end up talking to a telecom salesperson, and they'll help you answer all the questions and kind of paint you in a corner where you can only buy their equipment. So understand these options before you start. You'll have your own vendor neutral solution kind of fleshed out, and then you can go in any direction you want. So I've got an outline here that kind of takes you through everything you need, even though it's mostly about a lot of people mostly want to know about their phones. It really starts with your internet, because you have to have your internet connection squared away to have your new Voip hosted phones work well. Very few people are buying phone systems anymore that are based on the old copper phone lines, and so all the dial tone goes through the internet, so you want to make sure that your internet is squared away. So we're going to talk about the internet for a while. And then we're going to talk about IT services, because IT services, your internet only works as well as the IT services that support your internet connection. All right, so a whole lot of your IT services, these are used to have people in-house. Maybe you still have people in-house that do all of your IT, but hopefully they're specifically working on your business-specific applications and not worrying about so much about whether your internet connection is working or your firewall is working well. So we're going to talk about IT services and how you can get those specific to your business and not have to pay a whole lot of money for it. And then once we go through IT services, we're finally going to get to the telephone. Because if you have your internet connection squared away, if your IT services are squared away, then you can get a really cool phone system that does exactly what you want your phone system to do. Alrighty, so let's go. And again, everything that I'm going to talk to you about today, you can do yourself as a business owner, you can do yourself as an IT director, or you can contract with someone like myself who is a telecom consultant, telecom agent, channel partner. We've got a lot of different names. And you can either pay us directly to do this, or you can also, it works kind of like a broker or a real estate broker, where we can place the orders through the carrier for you, and then the carrier pays us commission. So regardless of how we get paid, we can certainly help you a lot. All right, so let's go back up to the top. Okay, your first is your internet. All right, now most every business is going to start out with a single internet connection. Now it's going to be a cable coax connection, or it's going to be a fiber connection, either from the cable company or a local phone company. No one really buys T1s anymore. It used to be you get a T1 as 1.5 megs, but that's super slow. 5-10 years ago, when bigger fiber used to come out, people would try to get the biggest single fiber connection, internet connection that they can get. But what you want to do anymore is probably get 2 cable connections or 2 internet connections, or maybe even 3 internet connections. We're going to talk about the pros and cons. It used to be you just get one big, maybe a 10 meg internet connection. And then what you would do is you would try to get your firewall to shape traffic going over that single internet connection. all right, by the use of what we call VLANs, or virtual local area networks, set up through your firewall. And what that would do is it would separate your big file uploads or file downloads from your other traffic, latency sensitive traffic like your voice or video. For those of you who have fooled around with hosted VoIP services, you've probably noticed if someone in your office is uploading or downloading a huge file, that kind of tends to step on your voice or your video phone call. So to fix that, we would have to separate the file transfers from the latency sensitive voice phone calls. That can be kind of tricky to do, and if you don't do it right, even though sometimes it seems like you do it right, it doesn't always work that well. But if what you do is you get one connection for your file transfers and another connection for your latency sensitive traffic like voice or video, then it becomes very, very easy to manage. I've done this with my own customers, get a couple of cheap cable connections, one I think I've got customers got one 50 by 20, 50 by 10 connection, 50 meg down, 10 meg up for their file transfers, and another connection, I think it's 25 by 5 for their voice. Works super well. All right. Now that's one of the things we want to note to you, that when you're buying cable internet specifically, it's what we call asynchronous, where the download is always a lot more than the upload, sometimes 20 or 5 or 10 times more. So a classic speed will be 50 meg down, 10 meg up. Now people don't really realize that the up speed is really the most critical speed, because more and more people are uploading files to the internet, video files to the internet. Whenever you're doing a voice conversation, half of it is upload. So really, when you're buying coax, it's pay attention to the lower upload speed, because that's really your limiting speed. Now, if you are now, the other thing you want to do is you want to talk to your neighbors wherever you're moving into your business. Find out what the reputation is for the local internet provider, because if it's super stinky, you want to know that going in. But generally, you're going to have a choice between cable and or internet. You might even have fixed wireless if you're in a dense business location, or sometime even on the outskirts. So ask around. Cable is always going to be your first choice. Fiber from the local phone company will probably be your second choice, and fixed wireless. And the way fixed wireless works is it's a wireless provider, and they have two dishes that point at each other. They usually give pretty good internet depending on where you are, but it's kind of a boutique-y thing. So ask around, find out, and then get two of those for your main internet connection. And these will be what we call unmetered, where it doesn't matter how much internet you use, it's always going to be the same flat monthly price. All right. So now the second type of internet that you're going to need is what we call the wireless business internet for failover. Okay, because sooner or later your wired internet is going to fail, whether it's once a year or once a month or once a decade. I can promise you that when it does fail, you're going to hate it. All right. Wait. One other thing I wanted to mention. Manage your IP addresses carefully. The internet carriers are pretty tricky. The IP addresses that come with your internet connection, they own those, all right? And they, unlike your phone numbers, they don't let you port them over. So 5 years from now, or 1 year from now, or however long from now, when you want to switch internet service providers, they're not going to let you take those IP addresses, all right? You're going to have to change them to whomever you're switching to, all right? And so that is a huge pain in the butt, as you can well imagine, if you haven't keeping careful inventory of all of your IP addresses. So definitely make sure that you do that. All right. So if you ever have to switch, it becomes a lot easier. The customers that I've had that they just they can't ever switch because they haven't kept track of all their IP addresses, and they literally have hundreds of them, and trying to swap them all out is impossible, and so they pay whatever the carrier charges. Now, if you have two wired internet connections, what you'll do is you'll constantly be kind of playing off one against the other. Okay, because if you keep in your IP addresses straight, you can, swap them from one to the other. But really, what any of your carriers are going to look at is, let me see what you're paying for, equivalent service. So if you constantly have two internet connections and you're, basically letting them compete against each other, you're always going to get your best price. Now, back to the wireless. You want the wireless because the cable is unmetered. Your wired internet connection is unmetered. You're always going to pay the same flat monthly rate no matter how much of it you use. All right, but it's in the ground. So sooner or later, it's going to break, unless you have fixed wireless. But even fixed wireless breaks from time to time. So you always want something to fail over to when the landline internet breaks. All right, so the things that you're going to want to flip over to is generally AT&T or Verizon 4G or LTE. It's the same internet, data internet that you have in your smartphone. Okay, it works pretty well. Now, in a business environment, especially if you have a VPN or you have outside locations engaged with your office, you need a static IP of some sort. All right, because if you don't have a static IP on your wireless failover, the other business connections that are trying to get a hold of you won't be able to find you. All right, so if you get AT&T or Verizon 4G or LTE failover and you don't have a static IP, then it's kind of failover where you're going to be able to get out into the internet, but people that are trying to get into your business won't be able to do that. Now, the other thing you need to notice is the signal strength of the connection. All right, now you can figure that out just by taking your smartphone, either AT&T or Verizon, and going into wherever your computer room is and seeing how many bars you have. Because when your firewall fails over to the wireless, that's how many bars you're going to have. All right, so if you only have one or two bars in your computer room, you're going to be looking at getting an antenna. Now, we've got a couple hyperlinks here. There's been a lot of people have luck with a fancy Sierra Wireless antenna. And then there's some MoFi routers that we've had good luck with. So check out that if that seems to make sense. Now, what I've used very well is an Exceed satellite internet connection. Now, the reason that I like the Exceed internet connection is for two reasons. Number one, it comes with a persistent IP. Okay, so you don't really need to fool around buying a static IP. It comes with a persistent IP, and you can talk to Exceed about exactly how that works. But I've put it in for several clients. It works very well. Okay, they don't tell you in advance of what the persistent IP is going to be, but once you turn it on, you test it, it delivers your persistent IP, you write it down, and that's what it's going to be for most cases. And so people can log in, your managed services provider can log into your firewall when it's failed over to the wireless because they know what the persistent IP is. Now, the other reason that we really like the Exceed service is because it solves the antenna problem. Now, the Exceed service, it puts a little tiny dish on your roof, okay? And so you need the owner of the building's permission to put this on, but just like when you're putting a DirecTV or whatever dish on your home, you have to put a little dish on your building. It points up to a satellite, orbiting overhead, 22,000 miles or what have you, and then it snakes a Ethernet cable down to your computer room. Now, it's awesome because it's a weatherproof, works 99% of the time. I've got them in probably a dozen of my customers' businesses, and it just always works. Where for some reason, whenever we fail over to the 4G, maybe it works 50% of the time. But if it doesn't work when you need it to work, it's not working well enough. So we strongly encourage using the Exceed satellite. I know when satellite first came out, 10, 15 years ago, there was a huge latency problem. I'm not saying that latency problem has been completely resolved, but it's nothing like it used to be. If you were ever on satellite internet, you need to try it again because it works out very well, especially if you just get what we call the redundancy solution, where it's just 5 megs down, 1 meg up. They give you 1 gig of bandwidth. It's pretty much the same pricing as 4G, but you also need to know when it's flipped over, because it does charge you, an extra $15 a month, just like on your regular plan, whenever you go over the 1 gig. So you don't want it to fail over and then not know if you're uploading a lot of files. Now, the last thing to really say on internet connections is your modems need to be in bridge mode, all right? Because for real grown-up businesses, even super small one, you want all of the control of your internet connection and your local area network to go through your firewall. Okay, now I know that a lot of internet companies, business internet companies, when they give you the modem, they'll tell you, oh, well, we're going to give you it comes with a firewall. Well, you don't really want to use that one because, quite frankly, you're not in control of it really all that much. Sometimes they'll give you a portal, sometimes they won't. But how do I be frank here? Your internet company doesn't care about your firewall. If they give you a freebie firewall, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe they know how to set it up, maybe they don't. You just don't really want to fool around with it. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to get a grown-up business firewall from a local managed services company and have them manage it. So if something goes wrong, it's their fault. They got to fix it, all right? You don't really want the internet company doing anything but saying, hey, our modem is in bridge mode. And bridge mode means they don't stop anything, all right? Everything passes through one way, everything passes through the other way, and then the firewall does all of the control. Now, you still want to, even when you've got it set up in bridge mode, you want to make sure that the internet company can still access the modem, because there's a bunch of lights on your modem for your internet. You have to know what's going on with them, because when the internet goes down, you have to look at it, figure out how do you troubleshoot these lights, when do you reboot the modem, and you just always want to make sure that it's constantly in bridge mode, because if your managed service providers start trying to solve problems, first thing they're going to ask you is your modem still in bridge mode? And so you need to be able to contact the internet service provider, have them be able to log into it even though it is in bridge mode, and confirm that. Now, about half of the internet providers out there, they will allow the customer to log into their modem because it's connected to your local area network. You should be able to get an IP address that you type into internet browser on your network and be able to access it, usually with the password, and you can check some of the settings yourself. But the time to get ready to do all of that is not when you're having an internet connection outage. You want to be able to test all of that, make sure you can access your modems before your outage. So make sure you ask the questions up front. Will I be able to access it? Can you put it in bridge mode? And then once you get it installed, make sure either you or your local managed services provider or your internet provider can access that, because it's going to become a big deal during your first internet outage. All right. And the final thing is, do you even want to manage your own modem? This doesn't happen a lot, but a lot of managed services provider who are either managing your WAN or managing your LAN will say, hey, we don't even like using the local internet provider's modem. They have their very own modem. That comes with its own set of trickiness. So before doing that, if your managed services provider is trying to sell you on the benefit of maybe buying a combination firewall modem. Talk to some of the references, make sure that makes sense, because I don't have a lot of customers that do that. All right, so that's all about the internet connection. Now, the internet, everyone is going to assume that your internet connection is working correctly, and so you want to be able to troubleshoot it yourself. All right, because everyone is going to want to blame your internet connection. So understand how it works, and this IP chicken, what that does is it tells you what internet connection you're going out of over. Because if you have a failover, like let's say with Exceed, you're going to get a persistent IP address, and that'll be different from the normal static IP address that you get from your internet connection. And that's one other issue. You're going to need at least one static IP address to address your firewall. Okay, most internet services providers, they'll give you one static IP address for like $15 a month extra, and then 5 for 20. So for an extra, $5 a month, you get, 4 more. So generally, just get 5. They ask you what you're going to use them for. Just put servers. All right. So moving on to IT services. Now, IT services fall into really 2 categories. All right, you have your WAN IT services provider and your LAN IT services provider. Now, your LAN IT services provider is the person that you normally think of who makes your computer connect to the printer and print. I mean, really, that's mostly what it's all about, because more and more of everything is done in the cloud, but people still want to have something print. Your local printer has to do it. Your computer has to be connected to your printer for that to work. Okay, and you've got time clocks. You just have all kinds of little computers that are in your office that have to work. They have special applications, and generally your local area network, some guy who can drive to your place and fix something, or more often than not, they'll be local and they'll just log in and they'll fix it. He's the guy that'll be making sure all the computers have some sort of virus protection software, but he does everything what we call outside on the customer side of the switch. Now, the switch is all of the computers in your office are most likely going to be connected by cables, unless it's all wireless. But most offices, they connect their computers securely to Ethernet cables, and then they go back and they go into what we call a patch panel. And then from the patch panel, which is all numbered, corresponding to the plates on the wall out in the office, so everyone knows what everything's plugged into. Then from the patch panel, it goes into the switch. And then from the switch back to the firewall, back to the modem, and out to the internet. Now, the switch is really usually anymore the line of demarcation. Everything from the switch onto the internet is going to be managed by your WAN managed services provider, which more often than not is going to be your internet carrier, hopefully. And then everything on the outside of the switch onto your applications, that's going to be your LAN managed services provider, the local guy that makes your printer work. Okay, so you want that to be the line of demarcation, because the guy trying to make your printer work, he's going to want to blame your internet connection, or blame your firewall, or blame your switch. And the internet provider, what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to blame your LAN guy. So generally, if the internet provider stops at your modem, they're going to say, well, it works to the modem, and then your firewall or your switch isn't set up correctly. The firewall and the switch used to belong to the LAN managed services provider because, it's on premises. But over the past 2 or 3 years, the firewall and the switch have really migrated over to being the responsibility of your internet service provider. So what I do with all of my customers is I say, look, we want to minimize problems. So what you're going to need to do is your firewall needs to be managed by your internet service provider, and the switch needs to be managed by the internet service provider. And the reason is the number one application that people have right now outside of their switch that they really need help with is Voip phones. All right, so your Voip phones, your desk phone, is going to plug into your switch, and the audio quality that you have on your phone is going to be highly dependent on how well your firewall and your switch are managed. So if you want to completely minimize your problems, what you need to do is get your internet, your firewall, your switch, and all of your Voip phones from the same vendor. Okay, I can't explain how important this is. All right, because if you get your hosted phones from, El Cheapo, we do hosted phones, and you have bad audio quality, they're going to blame your switch or your firewall or your internet provider. All right, so you just need one single throat to choke. Most of the internet providers, they do phones, and so you just want a single point of responsibility all the way through. All right, so enough of my sermon. So let's go into our bullet points here. Okay. All right, we talked a little bit. Okay, so your firewall. I use SpectraTel as a managed services provider that provides internet connectivity. They use FortiGate firewalls by Fortinet. Now, a lot of people say, Fortinet, we prefer something else. We prefer this, we prefer that. My own personal opinion, the most important thing is to make sure you're with somebody who really knows firewalls, all right, whether it's Fortinet, FortiGate, or some other firewall out there. Just make sure whoever's doing them has access to, a lot of training, they know what they're doing, and then they have super awesome access to the FortiGate organization, all right, or whatever firewall organization, all right. That's what you want. And that works out really well. A lot of them, they specialize, like SpectraTel, they specialize in FortiGate. All right, so if you don't like FortiGate for whatever reason, then you probably don't want to go with SpectraTel. But let them decide. Again, they're responsible from end to end. I use SpectraTel for internet, firewall, switch, hosted phones. They own it all. All right, so they're highly motivated to get it fixed, because what will happen is when you have a single point of contact that owns it all, then when there's a problem, they pay to solve the problem. If it takes them 1 hour, if it takes them 10 hours, they're paying their tax labor. All right, you don't want to be in the position where you're paying your local LAN guy, $115 an hour to sit and babysit and solve problems that may or may not be caused by your internet provider. All right. So now we talked about having a primary internet. When we ever say WAN, we're talking about internet. So your firewall is going, look at the back of it, all right? It's going to say WAN 1, WAN 2, and then probably 4 LAN ports, 4 different things to plug into. Generally, your main internet connection is going to go into WAN 1, and then your failover is going to go into WAN 2. All right, and what they can do is then you have 4 LAN ports for usually your switch or anything else that goes directly into the firewall. Now, a good FortiGate provider, what they'll be able to do is they can reprogram one of the LAN ports to be a WAN port. So we start out with 30 Ds or 30 Es for one of my customers, and it only had 1 WAN port, and what they were able to do is take LAN 4 and reprogram it to be WAN 2. So in a perfect world, you're going to actually have 3 WAN ports, okay? 1 wired internet for file downloads, 1 wired internet for latency-sensitive applications, and then 1 for the wireless failover, okay? And so that way you can use traffic shaping to go over WAN 1 and WAN 2, and then you're not ever really going to use the wireless connection unless one or both of your other internet connections, the landlines, fail over. All right, now you certainly, and you want to make sure your firewall sends you a alert. If you ever fail over to wireless, you don't want to not know about it. All right, because you only get 1 gig of transfer generally before you start paying 15 bucks a month, 15 bucks extra for every extra gig. And if you've ever gotten a surprise cell phone bill, you know how upsetting that can be. All right, enough about all of that. Let's move on to number 2 here. Now, and we've talked about having a firewall manager because they're going to do all of the setup, your WAN security, your content, you know, whether porn gets onto your network or not. They're going to set up your VPN if you want to be able to log in and access some of your computers or your servers while you're on the road or at home. They'll set up your VPN. And you also want them setting up your Wi-Fi. We'll talk about, don't get the Wi-Fi through your internet modem, okay, because it's generally unprotected. You don't want your guest or whatever jumping on your internet connection, you know, outside your firewall. Have all of your Wi-Fi go through your firewall with not just the signal that comes out of the modem, but you want to have it come from access points, you know, around your business. You know, yes, it does cost extra, but it's the more grown-up way to do it. And then you have someone who's totally in charge of making sure that it's working correctly. Now, you can have the access points put in by your LAN guy, you know, and they'll plug into the switch, or you can have them plug into the firewall. Just make sure you decide whether your LAN guy is going to do it, your internet provider is going to do it. More often than not, it's going to be your local guy. All right, but these are just extra devices. But make sure that your internet provider and your local LAN provider are working together to set up protected access to your Wi-Fi. Now, generally, what you're going to want to set up your Wi-Fi is have 2 of these SSIDs that you can find when you turn on your Wi-Fi device. One will be for guests, probably that don't require a password. Maybe they'll just have to click on yes, I'm not going to do porn. And then you'll have another one for your employees when they bring in their laptops and they're going to be using it to access your VPN or something. All right. Okay. Now, one thing that we didn't really talk about your WAN provider is you want to have a checklist from the internet provider that proves everything works. And the way you do that is when they first deliver the internet modem, the firewall, all the way to the switch, there'll be nothing plugged in. Okay, and so the first thing that you can plug in is your own laptop. All right, you always want to have a laptop on site to plug into the switch and do some troubleshooting, because there's a lot of acronyms out there, DNS, DHCP, and all these addressing acronyms help make sure that whatever you're plugging into your switch, your laptop can find the internet, and the internet can find your laptop. Okay, managed, of course. So whenever you have a problem, you want to talk to your internet service provider. Can you see the firewall? All right. Can you see my laptop plugged in on the other side of the firewall? All right, because at some point there's going to be problems. All right. So if you unplug everything from the switch, number one, you'll most likely find the thing that is creating the problem on the customer side. And then, okay, look, everything works perfectly when nothing's plugged into it. And then you start plugging things back into it one at a time, starting with your laptop, and all your other stuff. That's why you want to have all of your equipment properly labeled out in your office space, going back to a patch panel before it plugs into the switch, so you know what's what. All right, but be sure you understand, or your LAN managed service provider understands, how do we prove that the WAN provider, the modem, is in bridge mode, going to the firewall properly set up, going to the switch, that it's working correctly, giving out the proper DNS and DHCP, and then everything is working. So have that before you start pointing fingers at each other. All right? And don't circumvent the firewall. A lot of times you'll bring in a new piece of gear, oh, I need internet. And you say, well, everything needs to be plugged into the switch. So then it can go through the firewall, go into the internet modem. Now, first thing that happens is, you run out of switch space, all right? You got a 24-port switch and you got a 25th piece of gear. Well, there's no ports. I'm just going to plug it into the firewall, or I'm just going to plug it in directly to the internet modem. I mean, yeah, that'll work if, there's an emergency and you have to get something done today. But, go out and get a bigger switch. They're not that expensive, all right? Because when you start daisy chaining around your switch and your firewall, you're just going to end up with problems. All right. And what else? Next thing, you're going to want a managed PoE switch from your WAN vendor. Now, PoE stands for Power over Internet. And when you have a PoE switch, that means everything that plugs into the switch that needs power, like your internet phone, they're going to get the power from the switch, and you don't have to have a what we call a power brick or AC adapter plugged into every phone. You're really going to like that if you hate clutter on your desk. All right, and we've talked about this a little bit. Both the WAN and the LAN techs always want to blame the customer's switch. And so while, as we said, the switch used to come from the LAN vendor, get it from the internet provider, it reduces problems, especially when you can all agree that everything works correctly up to the switch. We talked about making sure the WAN vendor can prove everything is working to the customer side of the managed switch. And we talked about having a laptop available. Okay, well, let's see. We talked about the guest and secure Wi-Fi. All right, let's see. Need a list of all the hardware plugged in. All right, we talked about this a little bit, but before, the first thing the LAN or WAN provider is going to ask you is how big a switch do you need? And how big a switch do you need is everything that has an Ethernet cable that you're going to want to plug into the switch. All right. Now, certainly, most people know that if you're at your desk and you've only got one Ethernet cable coming to you from the computer room, but you got 2 or 3 things that you need to plug in. So what you do is you get yourself a little hub, and then start putting in a whole bunch of stuff. Now, you got to keep track of that, because when you start bringing in extra hubs or extra routers or what have you, you're going to screw something up. All right, so just make sure you have a list of every single thing that you need that's going to have to be plugged in. All right, because trust me, causes a lot of problems. I had a customer that their DHCP and the DNS wasn't working correctly, and there's something out there that's giving out extra addressing, and it turns out it was a router underneath the floorboard plugged into a hub on their network. It costs probably them $1,000 of labor to find that problem. All right, and it's all because over the years you just lose track of what's plugged into your network. You always want to remove old gear, all right? And don't just let end users start daisy chaining stuff all together and solving their own problems, because it gets forgotten how it's done. It causes a bigger, more expensive problem down the road. So know everything that's plugged in, what it is and why it is. As well, you need to have a list of all your software applications running on your local area network. Okay, which ones are latency sensitive? That means, it has to be immediate. Like if you're having a voice conversation, it can't wait. Emails can wait. File transfers can wait. 1 minute, 5 minutes, it doesn't really matter. All right, and then know which applications use the most bandwidth and when. Okay, if you're doing a full system backup at midnight, probably not a lot of people using your network. if you do a full system backup at 9 o'clock in the morning when people are just getting in to the office, then that's going to be a problem because you have different applications contending for the available bandwidth. And your vendors are all, especially the internet vendors, they're always going to want to blame your applications. So have a good list of all the applications, because again, when you start backing them off to try to solve a problem, you need to know what the applications are so you can back them off one at a time. Okay, next, cable. Cable used to cause a lot of problem, but now with gig cable or 10 gig cable being a standard in more newer buildings, not so much. But if you're moving into an older building or you're doing mostly older buildings, it comes with cable. The real estate guy say, "Oh yeah, this cable's awesome." All right, well, he doesn't know if it's awesome or not. So what you want to do is actually have a cable pro come in and not certify every single run, but at least by 1 or 2 hours and certify the runs that are most critical. All right, if you're connecting your internet connection to a major server and they're supposed to be able to manage 10 gigs or 100 gigs or whatever, make sure that the critical cable connections in your new space are certified, okay, and they can put testing equipment on both ends and say, yes, this is awesome. And certainly do the same thing between the computer room and the boss's office, all right, and spot check it, all right, because once problems come up, that's all your vendors are going to blame your cable. All right, so spot check it, get it certified. Ask the real estate guy, who do you use for cable in this building? If they say, oh, just whatever electrician you want, well, that's a bad sign. All right, because a lot of electricians, they're nice and all, but it doesn't mean that they put in certified Cat 6e connections. All right. Now, we talked a little bit about daisy chaining. The only daisy chaining that is kind of okay to do is when you're connecting up your VoIP phone in between your computer and the Ethernet jack on the wall. Because for most older buildings or older setups, you have the cable connection, Ethernet jack coming out of your wall, going into your computer, and your phone is off doing something else. Now, when you get your very first VoIP phone, what you can do is, so you don't need to have a because your VoIP phone uses the same Ethernet cable connection as your computer does. So what you'll do is you'll just daisy chain the VoIP phone in between your computer and the wall. And the way that works is your computer will only have one Ethernet jack where you plug in, the internet or the network cable, but your VoIP phone will have two, and it'll have a little picture of the wall jack and a little picture of the computer. And so connect the wall to the phone that has the wall jack, and then connect your computer to the phone to where it has a little picture. And that's really the only daisy chain that you're ever going to want to do in your network. Have a LAN manager who solves computer problems past the switch. And we talked about this a little bit. Printers, servers, backup hard drives, your PC virus, and try to get the most of your apps from the cloud. Okay, all your email, all your docs should be in the cloud. Google apps, Microsoft Office 360, get them out of your office. They just create problems. All right, and okay, and a little bit more about what's going on in your computer room. You want to don't have your computer gear on the same circuit as your microwave and your coffee pot. It makes perfect sense, but a lot of people, they don't think about that. All right, when you're moving in, have electrician check. Does this go straight out to the power, or this when I'm plugging all of my servers in, what else is on that circuit? Don't have anything on it. Just have it completely separate, all right? Because whenever your microwave goes on and off, you don't want that, causing surges, all right? And a lot of problems are created by the modem and the firewall overheating, all right? And the reason that they have racks, computer racks, is to physically separate this stuff and have some air circulation. All right, I mean, wherever your modem is and your firewall is right now, go touch them. Okay, are they hot? Because if they are, they're not going to perform as well as if they're properly cooled. So you want to make sure there's proper air circulation around all your computer gear. All right, motherboards and hard drives, when they're smacked by power surges, they get broken. That's it. It's going to wreck your day. If you lose a lot of data because you had a hard drive plugged into it, it's not because we didn't warn you. Make sure that you have surge protection on your circuits that have that stuff going on. Make sure they have a battery backup, because the way the battery backup works is the power that are making your computer work is actually coming out of the battery backup. So when you have a surge or you have a sudden power outage, the lights might go out, but your computers keep on running because they're still powered off of your battery, much in the same way a laptop is. If you unplug the power of your laptop, it doesn't go out because it's actually running off the battery. So you want to make sure you have a nice big battery that your biggest stuff is plugged into. And wet electrical gear doesn't work well. Make sure you don't have a sprinkler right over all of your computers. And if you have power strips plugging stuff in, don't let the power strips be on the floor. Okay, tack them up so if you have a little bit of flooding, it doesn't fry everything. I have one customer that they do have the power strips on the floor, but they've got them in a Tupperware. All right, it's kind of funny. They can just tack them up on the wall, but that's what they decided to do. All right, so we've talked about your IT or your internet connection, right? And then we talked about your IT services, your WAN and your LAN managed services people who are going to make sure the internet connection is working correctly. Your LAN guy is the local guy that shows up, make the printer work. The WAN guy, more often than not, is going to be your internet service provider. Okay, and now that we've got internet and IT services all properly working, now we can finally have phones. Yay, phones! All right, and we're going to talk about phone numbers, phones, desk phone, soft phone, mobile phone, collaboration, conferencing, and then messaging. How do you get your message when you're not there to answer your phone? Okay, question number one: what happens when your main number is called? All right, do you have a receptionist? Do you have an auto attendant? What? Which people in which departments need a direct number? And then, do you want to transfer the people? Do you want to put them on park, put them on hold? And most all VoIP phones, they have two sets of flashing numbers. All right, in the old days, you had, just one set of flashing numbers. Now you got two sets. You need to know how all those flashing buttons work and whether or not you want to have, any flashing buttons at all. For my customers, honestly, the more flashing buttons, the better, because especially if they're older, my age, 50 years old, you want to look at your phone and kind of intuitively know what's going on. Now, it used to be, a VoIP phone with a lot of extra flashing buttons to let you know where the call is coming in on or who's on their phone, was pretty expensive. But anymore, you can get, an IP phone for $100, $150, where it does everything for you. It's got, a zillion buttons, all programmable. So if you think your users are going to need flashing buttons, get them flashing buttons, okay? It solves problems, because when there's a visual cue, where's the call? I lost the boss. People are going to be upset, so don't skimp on flashing buttons. All right? Now, before we really talk about, what happens when your main number is called, you need to know how many people have phones, and is it going to be a main office phone, a home office phone, a mobile office phone? Because when people dial a phone number, they're trying to get a hold of someone, all right? Now, the most important thing to understand about the new phone systems, the VoIP phone systems, is the difference between a phone number and then an extension number. Okay, an 800 number's they're kind of like, regular phone numbers, but, it's toll free. And then fictitious numbers are numbers that people dial, like plumbers. Plumbers, they might have a different phone number for every different part of, the state or whatever region they work in, because they want to seem super local. But all those different numbers, they all ring at the same place, some super scheduling place or a salesperson. So, but the most important thing to understand is that the phone number and the extension number are two separate things, all right? And so really, an extension number is generally going to be tied to a single person's phone, all right? So I have extension 101, okay? Now I might also have a phone number that's pointed at extension 101, but the phone number and extension 101, they're not forever locked like maybe you may have thought of in the old days, because I can separate the phone number from extension 101 and have that phone number ring a different extension, or ring a what we call a we'll talk about that a little bit later, or a group extension. So I might have extension 110 actually doesn't ring any phone at all, but it rings extension 101, 102, 103, and 104. Okay, so the extensions are addresses for specific phones, and phone numbers point generally at extensions. Now, the one caveat to that is there are certain phone systems where what you do is you actually you take it, the extension itself is just a software signature. Like, let's say I'm Dan Baldwin and I'm extension 101. Now, if all the programming for my extension 101, my speed dials and everything about me is just software only, then I can, when I'm in the office, I can log into any phone and make that phone act like extension 101, okay? Or when I go home or I'm on the road, I might have a spare, dumb phone equipment, and I log into it and I make it extension 101. But let's say maybe, my wife is my business partner and she logs into the same phone, but she logs in as extension 102. That's one important difference, where the actual extension programming can be separate from, the piece of plastic itself. Now, that's more the exception to the rule. There are some vendors that do that, and it's really pretty nice. If you're all over the place, you may want to just have your extension be something that you can program. All right, but most cases, the phone itself is going to be hardwired to a specific extension. All right, and if you want to be able to take calls when you're away from that piece of plastic sitting on your desk, what you're going to want to do is get what we call simultaneous ringing, where when a phone number gets dialed and it's normally pointed at a specific extension, that extension will ring on your desk, but you'll also program it to also ring my cell phone. Okay, now your cell phone will have a different phone number, but let's say that I've got, 714-525-8100 is programmed to ring my extension 101, but it can simultaneously ring my cell phone and even my home number, or you can log on to the cloud and make it ring different stuff, kind of almost do it on the fly. Some companies, what they'll do is they'll give you a little smartphone app where you can kind of reprogram that all on the fly. But again, the most important thing is phone numbers. How many phone numbers do you need? Okay, do you need one for the main business? Do you need one for each individual employee? Do you need one for your tech support? Do you need one phone number for your sales desk or new inquiries? Do you need one for your premium customers? Because it used to be in the old days, you'd have just a single phone number and it would say, boom, if you know your party's extension, dial it now. Like, if you're calling from your cell phone, you don't want to, call one number and then, try to remember that person's extension, or if you want sales, press 1. If you want, customer service, press 2. All right. You have to imagine, where are these people getting this phone number that you're dialing? All right. So if it's on a piece of, computer software and it says if you need customer service or technical support, just have a number right there that goes directly into the technical support queue. All right, you don't want to have your main phone number on a piece of software where people just want technical service and have it go to a receptionist or go to Auto Attendant, then they have to listen to the thing. 800 numbers and direct numbers are super cheap, so get as many as you need, and then, help your customers by taking that phone number and pointing it exactly at the extension or the ring group where it needs to ring. So, for example, let's say that you're publishing a piece of software and it says for technical support, dial this phone number. That phone number will most often be pointed at, you don't really want it to go to just a single, your smartest tech. All right, it'll go to be what we call a technical support ring group, where you have extension 150 is pointed at your top 5 techs. And so when you get in the morning, you have 5 techs are all responsible for taking those calls. Then you just have that one ring group, and then all 5 phones will ring when anybody ever dials that technical support line, and whoever's first to pick it up, they pick it up, they take care of the problem. All right, now that's what we call kind of a poor man's call center. All right, so if you just have a bunch of people that are responsible for technical support problems, just set up a little ring group. Now, the one thing about ring groups is you want to, let's say that it rings, 5 people's phones, all right, but if all 5 of those people have a voicemail and people are calling after hours, well, how does a phone call made to a ring group extension know which individual voicemail is going to pick that up? Well, the answer is none of them. If you're going to use ring groups, you want to make sure you talk to your vendor to find out, well, if nobody answers the call that goes to a ring group, I don't want it to go to any of the voicemail of the people that are in the ring group. I want it to go someplace else. And I had a vendor, they thought, oh, well, it's they just assumed that someone would always answer that call and it wouldn't default to one of the voicemails. And so make sure that whoever is, provisioning your ring groups, they have it programmed to where if it's unanswered, it goes someplace else and not just one of the voicemails of the extensions in the ring group. Now, one other weird thing that always creates problems is people who have bosses and secretaries. Now, in the old days, the boss might have a direct number, but he never answers it, right? Because he's got a secretary that answers his direct number. Now, it's called a shared extension. Okay, so that shared extension will appear on the boss's phone, and it'll appear on the secretary's phone, and maybe there's even one other person that backs up the secretary for when she has to go on, bathroom or lunch break. All right, now the challenge with shared extensions quite often is there's only one talk path, on the older phones. And so this is where I remember I was talking about all the flashing lights. So what'll happen is, if this is super important, you got a boss and the secretary's backup always has to answer the boss's phone. You're going to have to load them up with some extra buttons. And when the secretary's phone rings, they have to visually know, is someone calling for me or are they calling for the boss? Okay, and so if you pick up the shared extension, does it block that path so if someone else calls the boss while you're still taking care of the first boss's call, will the second one get it busy? Will it go into the boss's voicemail? Or will you have a shared line rollover to where it's like boss line 1, boss line 2? Okay. And if you're taking the boss's first call and then a second one comes in, can you put the first one on hold, take the second one, and will the boss see that his line 1 is on hold and the line 2 is coming in? And when you put it on hold, is it the same buttons to where you can just, intercom the boss and say, hey, I've got customer A on your line 1, on line 2, okay? Because back in the old days, when it was just a big, 10-line rollover group, it was pretty easy. You put them on hold and say, hey, boss, you got, your wife on line 2. All right, the whole line 1, line 2, line 3, it doesn't work like that anymore with the VoIP phones. If you like that flashing button so you know who's where, you have to specifically program the phone. So don't assume that the new phones are going to work like your old phones. They don't, okay? Now, the other thing that customers makes them super crazy is not being able to put a caller on hold on one line and then pick it up on another line. Okay, as we just said, the old-fashioned hold, it doesn't really work anymore, because in the old days you had 15 phones in the office and all of them had line 1 through line 6. All right, so you can put a caller on hold on line 2, walk to the other end of the building, that caller is still flashing on line 2, you pick them up, intercom everybody in the building, hey boss, wherever you are, pick up line 2. It's your number 1 customer. Anymore, what we do is we put it on park. Okay, so you're going to want to have a couple of what we call park orbits on your phone, to where you can put a customer on park or put a caller on park, and then whoever is in that park zone, they can have the same flashing park button. All right, and this is how we solved a customer's problem, where on their old phone, the boss had a direct number and then a direct rollover number, and you couldn't really replicate that on the new VoIP phones. So what we did was we set up park orbits to where the secretary could see, the shared line extension coming in, and then when she answered it, it popped off that shared line extension, and then she could put that caller on a park zone, and then the shared line extension that was the boss's main number could still be open for another call. All right, so shared line extension, group extensions, and then park buttons. How you set them all up is going to largely determine how happy you're going to be with your new phones. All right, and so make sure that however your phone works now, you show whoever's setting up your system every single thing, because they may have to change it around so it functionally works not the same way, but probably in a better way. And then shows you in advance how it's going to work, so you don't end up with some buyer's remorse. And when it comes to how your new VoIP vendor is going to actually make this all happen for you, they have 2 sets of software to choose from. Software set number 1 is the software that's in the cloud. All right, because you don't have really a PBX in your closet anymore that controls all the brains. All the brains are mostly controlled in the cloud, because that's where most of the programming is, the system programming. But how the programming works on the individual phone, sometimes that'll be in the phone itself, sometimes it'll be in the cloud. But by and large, most of VoIP IP vendors, they give you, it's not like, well, if you buy an NEC phone system, you have to have an NEC phone sitting on your desk. Anymore, if you buy, a VoIP phone system from, Spectratel, what they'll do is you can buy, Grandstream phones that sit on your desk, or Polycom phones on your desk, or any different sort of phone. And half of the programming that makes the flashing lights work will be on the phone and not in the cloud. And so if you go to your VoIP phone vendor, they'll say, Well, what different phone do you want? Well, that depends on what sort of feature you're trying to make work. Okay, so when you're talking about, well, I need a shared line experience, or I need, call park to work, or this way or that way or the other way, you need to focus on both the cloud and then the software on the phone. Which kind of Grandstream phone do you have? Do you have a GXP 2160? A 2170? Which model is it? So these are all the different things that are going to come into play for how happy you're going to be with this phone system. All right, so going back to your receptionist versus auto attendant, more often than not, people are going to have an auto attendant, but only connected to their main number. And these are only for people who don't know who they're calling. All right. Most businesses anymore, if you've got 10 employees, you want to have a phone number directly for those 10 employees, okay? Because if they're doing business, with a certain person, there's no reason to force that person to go through the auto attendant, remember that person's extension, and then get it that way. Or, you say, well, you don't have to remember this. If you're calling for Betty, press 1. If you're calling for Sue or Bob, press 2. Even that is more work than you need, because over time the people are going to swap out, and then you have to go in and re-record that. So give all of your employees a direct number. All right, you're going to solve a lot of problems. Alrighty. Transferring to voicemail. Now, the nice thing about giving people their own direct number is you don't really need to worry about transferring to voicemail. All right, because what will happen is if they don't answer that number, it'll go to voicemail. All right, and it ought to. Why bother some other employee? Okay, if the person that's calling in super urgent, then the person can put in their voicemail, hey, press 0 if you need an operator, or I'll call you back within 10 minutes because your email or your voicemail is transcribed. All right. Okay, we talked about logging in, simultaneous ringing. We talked about that a little bit. Soft phones and headsets. Now, a lot of people that are on the move all the time, they're they don't even use a desk phone that much anymore. I mean, desk phones are super nice because whenever you're having a conference call and it's a longer conference call, it's nice to have a nice desk phone that you can use your hands. And it's just got better audio quality than a soft phone. A soft phone is where you have a headset and you plug it into your computer, and then you have a little dialer that you can make calls from. Now, soft phones are great if you're recording a lot of calls. I record a lot of my calls, and I use a soft phone almost exclusively. But I also have a desk phone on my desk for when I want super audio quality. Or you expect to do a lot of three-way calling. Because three-way calling doesn't work so good on a soft phone. You have to have a pretty good soft phone for that to work. And a lot of phone vendors, they don't really specialize in soft phones. So soft phones are mostly for call centers where people only do one thing and they only do it one way. And a soft phone works really well. Headsets, if you have a wireless headset, you're going to want to make sure that your vendor, you tell them what kind of headset you're using now, what kind of headset you want to use in the future, whether it's a Bluetooth, whether it's a wired headset, whether it's a USB headset, and get all that known up front. All right. Call routing. We talked about ring groups. Talked about DID is direct inward dial. That just means everybody has their own phone number. All right. ACDs is, we talked a little bit about ring groups. It's the poor man's call center, where people get to their desk and they sit down from 8 to 5 as someone calls technical support. 5 different phones ring. All right, and then if it doesn't get answered, then it goes to a technical support voicemail. All right, The next level above that is what we call automatic call distributor, where people are actually logging in. Okay, so if, the thing about a ring group is you have to go to where the phone is. Wherever that ringing phone is, you have to have a human go there. All right, when you have a ACD, automatic call distributor, or real, call center, generally people can log in to the call center to take calls, and they'll log in from, a cubicle in an actual call center, or they might be able to log in from home. All right, so that's the next level up. Most hosted VoIP phone systems anymore come with a ACD, the ability to log in anywhere and be able to take calls, which is awesome, because if you have people that they need to work from home or they can't work at all, you're going to want to give them access to be able to log into your call center, from a soft phone or a desk phone at home. Okay, we talked about no answer routing. So a lot of times, once you get your phone system installed, every single number that you've got set up, every single extension that you've got set up, you're going to want to dial it, all right? And make sure if it's busy or if it's not answered, what happens, all right? Because no answer routing, busy routing, it's going to cause a lot of confusion. All right, so it's super important that whoever you're setting up the phone system for, you ask them, if you're on the phone and someone else calls, what do you want to have happen? If you don't answer the phone, what do you want to have happen? If someone's calling your direct extension, what do you want to have happen? If someone's calling your direct phone number, what do you want to have happen? Because, your phone will act differently if people dial a 3 or 4 digit extension as opposed to the whole 10-digit number that's pointed at your extension. All right. And if your extension, it's part of your direct extension, but you're also part of a ring group, how do you want it to act differently if the person is calling the ring group and not your direct extension? Do you want your phone to tell you this call is someone calling the ring group? Well, there's 4 other people party to that ring group, so you don't need to worry about it so much. Do you need to be able to know whether or not the other 4 people can take the call? All right. So it's really important with a software-defined phone system. What are the expectations for what's going to happen for a busy, no answer situation, no matter what extension or number is dialed, because you're going to need to test it. All right. And the easiest way to test things is with your cell phone. Okay. So once you get the phone system all installed, just use your cell phone, and start doing test calls. All right, and you can do it. And the nice thing about a cell phone is it has a caller ID. All right, and so that helps you see on your own phone how it's working. All right, so if you use your cell phone to call into a call group, when that call group comes and rings that phone, does it identify itself as the call group, or does it identify itself as the caller ID of the cell phone that you're calling from? So using your cell phone is a great way to test your whole system, and you're going to want to do that end to end before you sign off on this phone system works correctly. And you're going to want to do that testing because at some point down the road, someone's going to complain about something, someone's going to go in and change some software, and you need to be able to retest it to make sure, A, what you're trying to fix actually got fixed, and whatever they did to fix the one thing didn't mess something else up. Alrighty, enough about that. Let's go on to collaboration. All right. More often than not, all your phone calls are like scheduled, okay? Who even has an unscheduled call unless you have a call coming in from a customer or a tech support call. And video is super cheap anymore, okay? So you can get a conference bridge. I use zoom.us. There's others out there like it. I also use Uber Conference extensively, to where you can record all your calls, you can record all your video calls, you can record them onto your PC, you can record them, have them stay on the cloud. Personally, what I do is I record them onto my PC and then I upload them to Google Drive. Okay, and then it gives you a super secure link, and then you can share that link with anybody, and you don't have to pay a lot for extra storage. But you give someone that link, and it's super secure, and only they can access it, depending on how you've uploaded it. So if a call is important enough to schedule, trust me, it's important enough to record. And video elevates seriousness when you have when you have just a plain old audio call. People, they're doing other stuff. They're not really seriously paying attention. But if you schedule it as a video call, which is just as cheap to do with a service like Zoom.us, people get real serious. They take, they know their face is being videoed, and so they really tune in, especially if you're recording the call. They super tune into the call. So I highly recommend record all of your conferences, let people know they're being recorded, and then publish the recording so people, take your time seriously. And screen sharing can come with almost all of the conference bridges now. It comes with both Uber, it comes with Zoom.us, and it gets recorded as well. Okay, so if, like I said, if anything is important enough to schedule a call for, it's important enough to record. I wouldn't get too terribly bogged down in making sure that your hosted VoIP provider also does recording and or video screen sharing, because a lot of times what they'll do is one of two things. They won't really do it. It's not really what they do super well, and so they'll do it kind of a half-assed manner. And you don't really want half-assed when it comes to this collaboration. All right. Or what they'll do is they charge a whole lot extra per seat. All right, which you don't really want either. So I strongly recommend, if your hosted VoIP provider doesn't do collaboration really well, don't worry about it, because Uber Conference, Zoom.us is super cheap. Okay, and just do it through an outside vendor that kind of goes over your phone system until such time as your hosted VoIP provider it's just one more add-on. All right, unified messaging. That is the biggest deal. Is when people have their own direct phone number and they have simultaneous ring, where both their office phone is ringing and their cell phone is ringing. If it's unanswered, does your office voicemail pick up? Does your cell phone voicemail pick up? Do people want two different voicemails to be checking, or do you want just one? The simplest way to solve this is have your office phone voicemail pick up before your cell phone does. Okay, so if people are only calling your cell phone, like your wife or your kids, when you got a message in your voicemail, hey, it's my wife or your kids. But if it's any of your business contacts calling, it always goes back to your voicemail, because your voicemail from your business phone picks up first. But you also want to test it, because sometimes your cell phone is ringing and you have to look at your cell phone. Is that call coming in from the office, or is it my wife? All right, and then if you click you can't take the call, does your office calls go back to your voicemail for your desk? That's something that will cause a lot of problems for you. You want to check out in advance. Transcriptions, don't take voicemail if it doesn't have a transcription. All right, who has time to listen to telemarketing, or who has time even to listen to your biggest client drone on and on and on? All right, if it's important enough to take a voicemail, make sure your voicemail does transcription, so you can you look at it in your email, you can see the whole gist of it right away, and or it goes to your text or IM. And even more important is if all of your voicemails are transcribed, It'll be like 6 months down the road. Oh, geez, who was it that left me that message? Or when did that customer leave me that message? If everything is transcribed, then you'll be able to easily search and go find that message 6, 12 months down the road. And that, goes toward legal archiving. A lot of businesses, it might be a requirement that all of their messaging is archived. And if it's already transcribed, it's going to save you a lot of problems. Instant messaging and texting. Do your employees, do they need to IM each other? Hey, are you available to take a phone call? A lot of businesses like that. A lot of businesses, they let their employees do it over whatever, IM or texting software they already have. It's better to do it through your hosted services provider. So just like when we talked about collaboration, talk to your hosted service provider. How do you do IMing? How do you do texting? Okay, and can that come through the system? And it might be okay to get it outside the system if they don't do it that well yet, but more and more you're going to want to make sure that your provider can do that sort of instant messaging or texting. Alrighty, premises versus cloud phone system. The bottom line is, if you have just a single location and it's under 20 phones, just get a cloud system, okay? It's a lot cheaper. If you have more than 20 phones, it might pay off to get a premise-based system, kind of like the old system where you have a computer in your office, or it's like you have your own hosted system, but you have the hosted computer in your offices instead of the cloud. For smaller businesses, it's really just not worth it, all right? Because you end up, as we're in the next, you're going to Radio Shack your own phone system. You can get your own hosted VoIP server, get your own SIP trunks, set it all up. But in the long run, after you have your first couple of problems, you lose a deal over something, it's not really worth it. If you do have an IT guy in-house who just loves doing that stuff, you got to wonder, am I paying this guy $70,000 a year to, do whatever, tinker toy my phones? I would shy away from it unless you do it yourself and you just love it. You're the business owner. All right. Copper versus PRI versus dial tone, SIP dial tone. In the old days, copper and PRI dial tone, which is based on a copper twisted pair, was just the gold standard. It was the only way to get a perfect call. And when VoIP calls first came out, if you remember Vonage in the super early days, it didn't sound very good. Okay, that's all gone away. All of the carriers anymore are using SIP. Even if they are telling you it's PRI, they're mimicking PRI. If you need a PRI to go into your old legacy phone system, they're delivering it to your building in SIP, and then they're converting it to PRI. Okay, so 5-10 years from now, real copper won't even exist because the phone companies are trying to get out of the copper maintenance business just as quickly as they possibly can. And I believe they will finally be successful. All right, so everything's going to SIP in the cloud. So whether you're still using copper or PRI, you need to consider or plan for your migration to it because it's going to happen. All right, so once you get into hosted VoIP pricing, though, are you paying by the seat or are you paying by the simultaneous call? All right, because the actual only underlying cost for your provider is the simultaneous call volume. All right, if you've got 30 people in your office, all have access to a phone, how many of them are ever on a call at the same time, the busiest day, the busiest month of the year? Okay, a lot of my customers, they're mostly emailing each other or what have you. They're just not on the phone that much. Okay, so there might be a 10-to-1 ratio. They have one simultaneous phone call for every 10 phones. Okay, so most of the hosted VoIP providers, they have a portal that 6-8 months into it, they'll show you how many simultaneous calls do you ever get up to. All right, and that is really the most hard cost that they have. And so the two ways to buy VoIP phone systems is, well, you're going to pay X dollars a month for every simultaneous call. And then you just stack up all of the phones are super cheap because people are hardly ever using the phones. Or what they'll do is they'll say they're not giving you a simultaneous call price. What they're doing is they're giving you a seat price. It's X dollars per month for every seat, regardless of the number of simultaneous calls. Well, if they do that, they're just blending it, all right? So they probably know, 10 to 1, 5 to 1. They're kind of architecting it themselves. So you probably want to have most businesses, what they'll do is they'll just start with a fixed rate per seat because they don't know how many simultaneous calls that they're going to have, all right? They just don't know, all right? But they know how many phones they need, all right? So get a phone wherever you need it, get your most reasonable price for all those phones, but then but if 6 months down the road, my simultaneous calls are a lot lower than I expect, be able to switch over to a simultaneous call price, all right? They'll probably, if you talk to them about that up front, they'll probably give you the best seat price, because they kind of know where it's all going to go, all right? And that way you'll be able to get, your best price overall. Alrighty. Now, the most important reason not to do your own Tinker Toy Radio Shack phone system is because of the legal requirements for 911. Okay? If for whatever reason one of your employees has to call 911, the 911 operator needs to know the physical address that they're calling from. Okay? I've got a client right now that, they're being sued because a bad thing happened when 911 didn't work correctly. All right, so make sure whatever phone system you're getting into, that when someone calls 911, the operator gets the right phone number. Not the right phone number, the right address, okay? And for big campus environments, okay, let's say that you have a small school or you have a business where all of your phones are spread over 5 or 6 different buildings. All right, if someone calls 911, which phone, which building, which office, and which building, that's the sort of information that needs to get pushed out. All right, and you need to understand, am I going to incur some sort of illegal liability? I mean, if you have an active shooter in building number A and they call 911, does it tell them that it's, the kitchen in building A, or does it just say one of the offices in one of these 6 buildings? All right, there is a way for this to be squared away. Make sure that you know how that's going to be done with any phone provider that you're engaged with. Fax machines. Unless I don't even, other than some doctor's offices, I don't know businesses that are heavy into fax anymore. All right, there's really no point in maintaining a super expensive fax machine and having a POTS line that you're paying anywhere from $50 to $100 a month for faxes. All right, just get eFax and get rid of all of your fax machines. All right, eFax is not that difficult to use. You don't need to get it from your hosted VoIP provider. You can get it from an eFax provider, so you get a good rate, because not a lot of hosted providers even do eFax. All right, and then, but a lot of people, they want an old-fashioned copper POTS line because they've got some old analog piece of gear that takes a POTS line to work, kind of like, a fire alarm or a burglar alarm. Whoever that provider is, contact them and say, hey, can we upgrade this to an IP interface so it will work off of internet instead of just the POTS line. Now, the pro and con is a lot of time a POTS line, if the power goes out, the POTS line still has dial tone on it and is the analog device that you're working off, if it's going into a modem and there's no power, it's probably going to die. But if you have it on a battery backup and it's super critical, then maybe you need that POTS line. But find out what are your options. Now, just talking about burglar and fire alarms, a lot of them can work off a 4G, LTE, or a radio mesh network that will most likely not go down if you just lose power in your building. Okay, check your local fire codes. A lot of people have, specific ideas. A lot of little small townships have specific ideas where you absolutely need 2 POTS lines. We're never getting away from that. And if you don't have it and your fire burn or your building burns down, then maybe your insurance won't cover it. So generally check with your local fire code first. But if your local fire code lets you put in one or both lines for your burglar or fire alarm as LTE, 4G, or radio mesh, you can save money that way. Inbound and outbound call routing. Now, if you've got hosted VoIP phone service, you've already kind of told your phone company what you want to have happen if you lose power to your building. Generally, that call comes into the hosted VoIP provider's cloud, and if all the power is out, it kind of knows where to send it. If everyone's got a DID number and the phone isn't working, it'll just go to whatever voicemail you have programmed. But you want to pre-plan that in advance, okay? So, if there's a snowstorm or whatever, people can go into the portal and they can reroute their own calls. Have all my calls go to my cell phone or my soft phone, working wherever. Okay, outbound calls, people are generally going to use their cell phone. But one thing is, if it's super critical that when people are making outbound calls, especially your salespeople, you probably don't want it to be from their cell phones, because if they then go to work for your competitor, you don't want all your best customers having the phone number that they're using go to your salesperson that just left. There is a way through hosted phone systems where even if they're calling from their cell phone, the caller ID that goes out to your biggest customer looks to be, your ABC Widgets phone number. And it might be even the ABC Widgets direct phone number for that salesperson. But then if the salesperson quits or gets fired, you still own that ABC Widgets phone number. And so when you replace that salesperson, all those calls will go to the new salesperson and not to the cell phone number, the personal cell phone number of the salesperson that left. So if that's important to you, make sure you talk to your hosted VoIP provider so that person using their cell phone is using a soft phone or an app on their phone that turns the outgoing call into your ABC Widgets phone number. All right, next is hot cut and forward and port. Now, when you're going from an old phone system to a new VoIP phone system, the problem is you're going to want to keep probably your old phone number because it's like published everywhere, right? So hot swapping is where, your 714-525-8100, it works in your old phone, and now at 10 o'clock in the morning or at midnight, whenever you want to switch it over, it has to work in the new phone system. It's kind of like the same as when you take your cell phone into Verizon or AT&T, you want to get a different phone. They basically have to port the number out of your old phone and put it into your new phone. Now, this works pretty well with cell phones, especially if it's just Verizon to Verizon or AT&T to AT&T. But if you're switching from Verizon to AT&T, it's a little bit more problematic because the carriers don't like to lose customers. The same thing when you're going from an old phone system to a new phone system, and you're what we call hot swapping or doing a hot cut. Everything can go wrong. All right, you want to do it at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's supposed to be done by 11, and then, you call AT&T, and they didn't get the paperwork, and nothing's ready, and it can just be a nightmare. In worst cases, your dial tone can just go down completely. or while they're in the process of swapping it over, people call it, the number says it's been disconnected. All right, so if you're going to do a hot swap, you need to make sure that you're working with highly confident and highly experienced carriers, and they know who you're going from, who you're going to, and oh yeah, don't worry, we've done this lots, and it hardly ever goes bad. All right, the forward and port is the easier way to do it, where what happens is you just get forwarding on your old dial tone, and you basically put in all new phone numbers. All right, and then what happens is if you want your cutover to happen at 10 o'clock in the morning, just at 10 o'clock in the morning, you forward your old number to your new number, and then boom, you're done. All right. Now, the challenge is, and then you can port the old number to the new number, but when you're making outbound calls, the caller ID is going to be that new outbound number that you get. Now, once this ported over, you can swap out the new temporary number for the old number, and the caller ID will be resolved. But these are things that you need to talk about up front. And then the other thing is, if in super old phone systems or old phone companies, when they call forward your old main number to your new main number, there might be a limit in the number of call paths. So if they call forward one, if someone else calls the old number while that path is still occupied, it'll get a busy signal. It's not so much anymore, but if you're out in the country and you have your carrier is using old phone gear, you could have a call path limit. All right, coming to the end here. Zombie old phone bills. All right, if you do a hot swap, what will happen is when you're moving the phone number, you'll take it off the old bill, it'll go onto the new bill. But if you're forwarding and porting, or you're forwarding and then you forget to port, you'll end up with old phone bills. They just never get canceled, and then you're paying for two phone services, your new one and then your old one that's not being used but still getting billed. So make sure that you require an accounting of all invoices before you start. Understand how you're going to get rid of your old phone bills, okay, because your new phones get stood up. How do you retire the old phones? All right, and then you need to audit those old phone bills every 30 days until they are all dead. And if nobody is doing this, I guarantee you 12 months from now, people are going to say, what are we still paying these old phone bills for? And then you paid them all, you're not going to get that money back, and someone's going to get in trouble. And also don't forget, when you got new service on that phone service 10 years ago, you probably put down a deposit. All right. If it was a big deposit, you want to make sure you get that deposit money back. All right. And then finally, yellow page, white page listings. I don't even know people who dial 411 anymore, but if that's a big deal for your boss, what you want to do is, if you get a hosted VoIP service, most hosted VoIP companies, they don't even worry about directory listings anymore. All right, but if that's a big deal, if you want to pick up a landline and dial 411, and then say I want ABC widgets in Temecula, California, you're going to need to have a directory listing somehow. Now, generally, if your hosted VoIP phone company won't do it for you, you're going to have to contact whoever is the official mobile carrier wherever you are and request a foreign directory listing, to where your phone number is coming through a VoIP phone company, and then they will list it for 411 in whatever town that you're calling from. All right, but the most important thing to do is, I don't have a lot of customers that worry about their 411 listings anymore, but they do spend time worrying about if people Google them, Bing them, or Yahoo search them, does the right phone number come up? All right, so spend a lot of time Googling the different parts of your business. If you have a lot of people Googling, tech support for, ABC widgets, does the special number that you have for tech support show up? Okay. Now, a lot of that's almost outside the realm of your hosted VoIP phone company, but if your hosted VoIP phone company or your telecom consultant is really hot, then they'll talk to you about all of your options there. So we've talked about phones, we've talked about IT services, we've talked about internet. These are all the things that you need to know in order to set up a phone, internet, and IT managed services for a single location business. Multi-location businesses, not a whole lot different than what we've talked about here. We'll talk about that in a future video. But if you have any questions about any of this, do contact your local telecom professional, or just get more help, and good luck.